Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lincoln Coaching Podcast. Today, I have with me Collette Williams, who is a touring musician, percussionist, and backing vocalist for a band called Blossoms. She has played massive shows and festivals such as Glastonbury, Reading, and Leeds. She's been on huge shows such as Graham Norton, Top of the Pops, and she's also currently lecturing at BIMM University in Birmingham, which is one of the most prestigious and biggest music industry education providers in the UK. She's also been in Kerrang! Magazine, Rock Sound, and Drum Magazine. Collette, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks. And you just got back from Canada.
Yeah. Holiday. I don't really get to say that very often because holidays when you work in the music industry are like a non-existent thing. A holiday is usually like a day off between two gigs in a city somewhere where you're like, oh, maybe I'll have time to get a coffee and see some of the tourist attractions. But yeah, had an actual 2-week holiday in America and Canada, visiting family and friends, which was absolutely fantastic, and kind of it refilled my my soul jar, if that makes any sense. Like it kind of put them some tokens back in my in my soul from seeing family and friends.
Awesome. So you've been in the music industry for quite a while now, and you're now playing in a band called Blossoms, right?
Yeah.
As a percussionist.
That's right. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that kind of came around in a really cool way. So initially I had just finished up with the previous project that I was doing, a band that I was playing in, which was me and one other person. That kind of came to a close, and I was approached by the tour manager for Blossoms, who was someone that I'd kind of met along the way through friends of friends and through the industry. And they were looking for a drum tech to look after Joe on drums. And it's something that I'd kind of dabbled in previously and had obviously done for myself as well. And I was between gigs, so I thought, yeah, why not? Sounds brilliant. Great band. Loved the tunes. Heard that they were really lovely to work with. So I thought, yeah, a new adventure, jump on that. Got thrown straight in at the deep end. My first few shows with them were Reading and Leeds Festival. So, it was like 0 to 60, pretty fast.
That's huge.
But yeah, it was just fantastic. Really, really lovely people to work with, the band and the entire crew. We all kind of gelled straight away. I loved looking after Joe's kit. It's really fun to kind of tune and play and sort of maintain. And then it sort of transpired shortly after that. I'd only probably done about 6 or 7 shows, I think, at this point with them. It then transpired that they were looking to add an extra session musician to their live show, who could play percussion and sing backing vocals. So they asked if I'd be interested in doing that, which of course, I absolutely bit their hand off and was like, yes. And then, before I knew it, I was kind of part of the live band, and it's been that way ever since. So if my memory serves me correctly, I think that's been 4 years this year. It's just been a whirlwind. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's taken me here, there and everywhere around the world with them. We've played some fantastic shows, and it feels like I joined just yesterday, to be honest.
I was going to say, it doesn't feel like 4 years.
I know, it doesn't to me either.
You joined the band.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's gone very, very fast.
And in terms of like getting into the industry, because this is kind of like a dream come true for like a lot of musicians, and obviously you went to university to study music. What did it take for you to get the success that you've had and to see the opportunities that you've had?
Yeah, it was like you say, it was a dream come true for me as well. I think I really kind of enjoy answering this question, and I do get it a lot because I think the pathway looks very different for everyone. Unlike many other professions or industries where there's kind of a pre sort of set out ladder or pathway of steps that you take to get somewhere, working in this industry and doing a job like this it's really unique for everyone. And I think for me, once I'd finished university, I then went into a few jobs that were just paying the bills kind of jobs. They were not what I wanted to do, not jobs that I was really passionate about at the time. It was just I needed to get some money together, I needed to pay the bills, and I was working, so it was good at the time. And then I'd been doing that, I think, for about a year after uni, and a job came along working for a private music education provider, like a university. And I started working in the admissions team there. So it wasn't playing music or doing music, but it was helping people find a music course and a music degree. And obviously, having just come out of one, I thought, oh, well, I might be quite good at that. I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit. And I've been a student, so I could be as good as anyone to do that. So I started there, and I think that was a really good place to be because it was in Guildford, so it wasn't in London. So Guildford in Surrey. And I started just making contacts and building a network and at least being back around music. And hearing about what was going on in the industry and being passionate about it, and obviously playing in bands and projects outside of my day job. And it kind of went from there. So from there, I kind of sidestepped and moved to London, worked for another education provider, and just started doing auditions in London when I heard about artists or bands who were looking for drummers, percussionists, vocalists. And started to build my network. So I started to build contacts with record labels, with publishers, artist managers. And I think the great thing about doing auditions is, even if you don't get the gig, you'd like to hope that you're in that person's mind if another opportunity comes up. And I've been lucky enough that that's what's kind of happened to me over the years. So people that I've met along the way have been like, oh, we need a drummer. Maybe the artist has stipulated that they'd like a female drummer. And they're like, who can we call? Oh, give Collette a shout and see how that's going. So I've been quite lucky to take advantage of those kind of opportunities along the way.
Yeah, that's actually happened for me in my current role. Actually, was I interviewed for a completely different role, and didn't get it, but really hit it off with the lady in HR, and she then phoned me up like a couple of weeks later and was like, hey, I know this isn't what you applied for, but I thought of you when this came up. It's the best job I've ever had. And I wouldn't have got it if I didn't go through that process, right? And build that connection and build that relationship. And obviously in the music industry, building relationships is super key, isn't it? Because like you said, people will recommend you. A lot of people in that industry know each other. They will talk to each other. Am I right in thinking that, by the way?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. The industry, the music industry is such a small place. The amount of times I have kind of crossed paths with people that I haven't seen for years in airports, just happening to catch a flight, or I've been backstage at a festival and been like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 8 years. How are you doing? That happens so frequently. It literally happened as I was flying out to America 2 weeks ago. I bumped into someone who I worked with at that very first job I just mentioned. Hadn't seen him in about 7-8 years. He was at the airport ready to fly out to start a tour in Europe, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what are the chances? But it really happens regularly.
How tough is it to like make it in the music industry right now? Because it seems to me, I'm not really involved with that kind of thing anymore at all, but it seems to be very competitive.
It is really competitive. I think it's an especially tough time at the moment, I think, economically speaking, politically speaking, socially speaking, because, we have had a really rough few years off the back of COVID. And whilst the music industry has definitely bounced back in a way, there is still some lasting effects that we are yet to kind of navigate through. COVID obviously being one of them. The other one being changes post-Brexit. There's still a lot of ambiguity around processes and logistics in the music industry, somewhat dependent on government changes that, maybe the legislation hasn't been very transparent, or maybe it's not been, even kind of confirmed still. So there has been a lot of change. And I think in the music industry, because you get a lot of self-employed people, it's not always the way that there is a manual or a guide to kind of say, this is how you kind of find the path through your job, or this is how you perform this practice. A lot of it is kind of trial and error and experience that you build up along the way. So when there were changes post-Brexit, a lot of the touring industry were like, well, what does this mean for, let's say, like transporting goods in and out of the country, for selling merch, for example? If you are taking merchandise to Europe, then there were changes about sort of import and export regulations, and everyone excuse me, and everyone was kind of like, how do we read this? There's not really any up-to-date literature. They're still working on it. What do we do in the meantime? And so everyone had to kind of come together and share that network even more, to be like, what did you do last time, just so we don't get caught at the border or we don't get fined. And it's really mad, so I currently work with students at another music education provider, and we're constantly talking about these things, because the hardest thing to navigate is that the music industry is always changing. Laws, regulations are always changing and developing, and you have to have your finger on the pulse and be ahead of that, because year to year, when I teach different modules, the material changes because sometimes it's not relevant anymore. And if something changes in the industry, or the way that we host events changes, you have to kind of be on top of that, which is a lot of work, really. I feel like even as a lecturer, I'm often the student, because I'm sometimes only 2 steps ahead of the students with what I've learned to then teach them. But I think a lot of the best teachers and lecturers will say that as long as you're 1 step ahead of your students, then you're fine.
And how are you juggling that with being a lecturer but also a touring signed musician?
Pretty well. It's definitely something that you learn and you refine along the way. When I started to gig, you soon kind of find that you get these opportunities come through, and someone will be like, hey, are you available on these dates, or are you available for the summer to do these festivals for this other artist? And you kind of look at your diary and you think, how am I going to do this? Because I've got loads of clashes. I can't say yes unless I can do all of the dates. But I usually can't do all of the dates because I'll have some clashes with that band that I work with, and I can't turn them down because, I've said yes to them. So it is really difficult, and there are definitely some soft skills that you need to have to be able to do this job. Organisation is king. You need to be an organised person, because it is so easy when you've got lots of different artists and gigs and dates flying around to kind of muck up your diary. And that becomes really difficult then. So organisation, absolutely key. Timekeeping as well, making sure that, you can get to places, because sometimes you might wedge a gig in on a day off between 2 other gigs that you've got, and you need to know that you can get there in a timely fashion, get back, get to your other gig. And in the first few years of doing this job, I definitely had a few mishaps, I'm not going to lie, where you're like, oh no, I completely forgot about that gig, or oh my god, that's in London, I thought it was Birmingham. Sure. So that's always going to happen. So it's just kind of learning from those things and being able to sort of look forward and plan ahead. But another hard thing about that is making sure that you still spend time with friends and family, because it can become all consuming. You fill your diary up, and especially as a self-employed person, you're always worried that the work's going to dry up, because you don't have that full-time kind of contract or that stability of things like sickness pay or holiday pay. You're just like, I'll take all the gigs, I need to take them all just in case anything happens. And I think things like COVID definitely showed us that, things can go wrong and things can go off-piste. So the fear kind of drives you at the same time.
I admire you so much, because I think working in the music industry must be one of the riskiest industries to be in, because of a lot of the reasons that you said. But also, it's like if you injure your hand and you're a guitarist, or you get some kind of disease and you're a singer and you can't sing anymore. And also, the travel and the expense, and often you're out of pocket, like right at the beginning as well. And then you're up against incredible people. And it's so easy to create music now and upload it for the world, right? I remember when, and you probably had this experience too, like when you first started to try and like record music, the quality would be like abysmal, and the effort, the hoops you had to jump through to get anyone to like be able to listen to it or publish it was very difficult. There are very few places to be able to do it. So I think that the amount of risk that musicians take now is probably greater than ever, especially like you said with COVID, right? Because live shows were basically cancelled across the world.
Yeah.
And if you had shows booked in the US and then in Europe and then Asia, you wouldn't be able to do any of that. You'd lose a lot of money, and you'd essentially be jobless. No, I mean, what did you do during that period where you couldn't perform, you couldn't play?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you're completely right. I think it is a really risky job to do, depending on your personality, really. I think it depends how confident and how comfortable you are with taking risk. A lot of people are not comfortable with that, and they would much prefer the stability of a contract, a full-time role, holiday pay, sickness pay, especially if you've got a family or if you've got a mortgage, and that is, I completely respect that and understand that. I'm not really someone who likes to take risks myself, but at the same time, I think I've just kind of learned from experience of how to troubleshoot and kind of prepare for that rainy day. Obviously, none of us saw COVID coming, and we were all in the same boat very quickly without a paddle trying to go upstream. And it was really scary. Honestly, it was, I remember it like it was yesterday, really vividly. So I was living in the city centre of Birmingham at the time, in a 2-bedroom flat with 2 other people. So there was 3 of us in there, all in the music industry. So we weren't frequently all at home. A lot of the time, one of you had been at home, you'd just come back from a tour, the other 2 would be away. As they came back, you'd go out, etc., etc. So, you kind of had the space and it was never too crowded. I remember being on tour at the time and starting to hear these murmurs of people saying, oh, there's this thing going on, COVID, people have been ill, touring parties have had people come down with it on the bus, other people have been catching it, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, and this is interesting. And I think one of the main things that you need to have in the music industry is resilience, because often you are traveling around, your house is on wheels, you're with 13 other people, flu, sore throats, all of that stuff is really common, and you have to just kind of brush it off, do what you can, look after yourself, and get up and go to work. And it started to become apparent that this wasn't that, it was more serious. Then we started to hear that tours were being cancelled mid-run, people were being sent home. And I remember within like a 48-hour period thinking, we'll be fine, we're doing good, it's all right, maybe one of their members has come down with something, but we'll be okay. And you're almost kind of a little bit in disbelief, because you're like, I don't want to think about the consequences, because if we get sent home, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So it was definitely a case of like, keep calm and carry on, just kind of keep moving forward. And yeah, within a 48-hour period, we went from that to going, oh my God, this is real. Most of our peers and colleagues have cut their tours short, have returned home. Some people have come down with COVID. And then I remember the day of getting that message of the tours being pulled. You're all going home. It's too dangerous to do this now. It's not safe to be on the road. It's not responsible to be encouraging people to still come to the shows when this is going on, which was completely the right decision. So we all got sent home. I remember being back in the flat with the 2 other people that I lived with, and we were all like, what do we do now? Let's stock up the cupboards. It was like there was a zombie apocalypse. We were like, right, quick, let's get down to Tesco. Let's buy all the toilet rolls.
Rice.
Yeah, let's buy all the toilet rolls. Let's get all the cans of baked beans. And it was like we were stocking up for an apocalypse, having no idea.
I remember going to Tesco's and actually seeing, like, I didn't know about the toilet roll thing. I just went to Tesco's because we needed some toilet roll and some other bits. And I saw the aisle, and I've got this like photo still on my phone of like a massive queue, people holding toilet roll and like trying to like find the odd toilet roll here and there hidden behind the the cereals or wherever it was, and pasta and rice being very like low, and just I was like, this is nuts, this is absolutely crazy.
It was like that game show Supermarket
maybe I should
Sweep.
do the same thing. It was I was lucky though, because where I lived, there was a really nice guy who lived in a newsagent's. He'd just taken it over, and he secured a bunch of like toilet roll rice from the impulsive buyers. And whenever someone elderly came in, he gave them free rice and toilet roll to make sure that they had it. And I thought that was a really lovely thing to do. But yeah, it was certainly crazy to see those. Did you line up outside Tesco's as well? Do you remember?
Oh
that?
yeah, I definitely queued for
one
stuff.
of the Tesco's I went to had like a traffic light system.
Yeah. We've still got that.
Where it was like a red light. Yeah, and yet. How are you?
Yeah. It's like going to a disco. You're like,
people just go into mine
green
now.
light,
Just
green
like...
light.
Yeah, I think that's such a like incredible time to like look back on, because it literally changed everything. And like I was saying with the whole risk thing, is that if that happened again and I lost my legs, I could still do my job completely from home and have that income for me and my family. But if you're a musician, then it's absolutely detrimental to what you do, because you go around the world and you tour and you see people in person.
Yeah.
And so it's just one thing you didn't even think about as a risk of being a musician.
No, not at all.
Because I think people tend to jump to, I'm going to be broke. And there's going to be people out there, it's going to be tough for me to get shows. I remember when I was a musician, I mean, I still am, but like when I was a performing musician, the toughest thing was just getting people to the shows. And I remember playing shows in front of like 2 people, and thinking, because I had no skills in promotion, I had no skills in marketing, so I would just like, I know the cool venues, I know where everyone goes to, I'll just book us that show and then turn up. And then that didn't work ever. Actually, that was there were a couple of huge failures.
It's really hard.
So like, yeah, I think a lot of it is really hard, especially now, because people are so used to doing so much at home and having so much entertainment at home.
It has got even harder now.
Yeah, and because I mean, I went to a show recently. I went to go see Paramore, and I could not believe how difficult it was to give away a free ticket to my friends and family. And I ended up just going with this random person from Reddit, and now we've got like a friendship for life. So that actually worked out in my favor.
I'm so gutted on my selfish really behalf, because I honestly, I would have chewed someone's leg off to be there if I wasn't in America. But I'm also very happy for you and your new found friendship.
Yeah, my new friend. Shout out to Daniel. So I think like one of the things people think about with learning instruments and going in or trying to go into that industry is the barrier that usually pops up when you don't get good enough quickly. And I talk to people all the time about, their kids are learning instruments, or they're trying to teach them to learn how to play piano, and they just expect to be like super good really quickly. What kind of advice would you give to people who are like facing that wall of like, okay, I see someone performing, they make it look like it's the easiest thing in the world. I know when I've seen you play drums, you just like, you do it so naturally, it's like breathing to you. But obviously when you start, you're terrible, and it's one of those skills that it's really obvious that you're terrible to everybody.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can, like, you know, be terrible without realizing it and kind of get better as time goes on.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you try and play a violin with no musical skill, and you'll find out very quickly that that was, you know, an investment that is going to take some time before you see any benefit.
Yeah. Sounds like a strangled cat
what
for a while.
What do you think is like? I mean, oh yeah, it does. I myself bought a violin because I'd learned a few instruments and thought I could pick it up and like self-teach myself. The violin was the one I could not do because it sounded so terrible. And I think, you know, the technique with the bow, I was just like, no, I'm gonna stick with guitar. That's good for me.
I started out
but yeah,
on the violin
what did
as well.
you do like when you were learning?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I started out on violin at school. I started singing first, and then I went to violin because I went to a school, a primary school, where we all had to pick an instrument, and it was a very limited pool to pick from. It, I think it was like flute, saxophone, or violin. Excuse me. And, you know, I was equally going to be screwed whichever one I picked, really. It was never going to turn out well. So I picked violin, and It was just awful. It did sound like a cat being strangled. And my parents, bless them, they were trying to be supportive. And I just remember my dad's face just looking at me like, really? Really? Do we have to go through this torture? And not even that. It was like, oh, and do I have to buy you the violin as well? Because, you know, just punch me in the face while you're at it. Why not? And bless them, they did buy me the violin, but it was really short-lived. I was awful at it. Honestly, I didn't enjoy the music because it was all classical repertoire. You know me, I am not someone that comes from a classical background. I enjoyed the kind of restraint and the education and the approach of that classical way, but it wasn't for me. So I kind of promptly gave the violin back, much to my dad's dismay, and was like, cool, what's next? So yeah, that didn't go down very well when I then said I wanted to play drums, because they were like, yeah, we've heard this before, you know, pick the noisiest instrument that you can, annoy the neighbours, and you know, and then give it up. But yeah, drums was a completely different kettle of fish for me. So I think you're right. One of the key kind of skills that leads to success on any instrument is consistency. You have to just kind of chip away and do it in kind of bite-sized chunks, really, to get better. And you've got to keep that consistency. If you don't practice, you don't get better. And you're right. I think it is human nature to want to pick something up and be brilliant at it straight away. Especially if you're passionate about something, you can almost visualize yourself playing it before you have the capability and the technical competence to play like that. And that can be really frustrating because you understand the concept, but you can't quite get it under your hands because you have to build that muscle memory. And that does take a lot of patience. It takes consistency and it takes commitment. And I think my advice to anyone would be that comes a lot more easily when you're younger. I know that sounds really cliche, but it is true. You've got less responsibility, you've got more free time. You know, you can really hone that passion and be like, yeah, I just want to go and play, you know, for hours. And I still remember now when I started playing drums, I would be in the garage and my dad would have to be like, come in now and you've got homework to do, or you know, you've got to eat, you haven't eaten for 12 hours, stop playing Blink-182 songs and come and have a sandwich.
Oh my god, and I can relate to that so much.
And I was just like, oh my god, all I want to do is like eat, sleep and play drums, and really sort of harness that passion. And I'm so glad that I did it then, because honestly it really does get harder when you're older. And even now, like, I will be the first to put my hand up and say that I do not practice regularly at all anymore. I often think, God, you know, what kind of musician would I be if I had kept up a really rigid practice regime, now prioritized that, and kind of worked on my weaknesses. But it's not always realistic to say that. Life takes over. You have a lot to balance. I think the modern day human now has so much going on. You know, the biggest task of all is just kind of prying yourself away from Instagram and TikTok. Being able to do that long enough to be like, right, okay, I'm going to develop myself, because we're just consumed by everything around us. You know, it's like being in an adult sweet shop and being like, oh my God, that's shiny. Oh, that's shiny. And you're like, no, must practice. So it is really difficult. But yeah, consistency is key, and you need to have the passion. I think the moment that you don't have the passion anymore, you need to be really honest with yourself. And I have several colleagues, friends, even family, who have maybe played an instrument or been involved with something, whether it's music or, another creative arts or a hobby, maybe all of their lives. And suddenly I've got to a point where they're like, do you know what? I've fallen out of love with it. It's not who I am anymore. And that's okay as well. That happens. You change as a person. So why wouldn't your interests change? The world changes. And sometimes, it is just the way it goes that you get to a certain point and you're like, this isn't for me anymore. But you do have to work at that passion and you have to work at your craft. And, the music industry and music generally is just, it is so saturated now. There is so much competition. It is not enough just to be able to sing quite well. Back in the day, it might be like, oh yeah, she's got a pretty good voice. Wicked. Yeah, you should be in the music industry, or have you thought of going on the X Factor, love? It's always that kind of stock line. Whereas now, that's not enough. You can scroll through TikTok for 30 seconds and hear 15 singers who are 10 years younger than you and twice as good as you are already. You've got that accessibility. You've got that direct line to people who aren't just okay at what they do. They're fantastic. And that's really hard because you have to try and pitch yourself against that and place yourself in the industry. So that's where that passion comes in. You need to really believe in yourself. You need to really want it, and you need to work hard for it, because there's going to be, for every one of you, there's going to be 10 people out there doing that. And to cut through the noise, you kind of have to be something special. And I don't say that to kind of put anyone off coming into the music industry. But there is definitely a set of things that you need to be able to kind of achieve to make it. And more than anything, just to make a living from it. I know myself, I've never wanted to be famous. I've never wanted to just be in the limelight for the sake of it. Actually, that petrifies me. All I wanted to do was make kind of an honest living, enough to live. Never wanted to be a millionaire, just enough to pay the bills and live a happy life and have the space to do, the other things and passions in my life. So I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. If you want those things and you want to earn a living from it, then brilliant, crack on.
I agree with you at every single one of those points. And I think what you said, even at the very beginning, really resonated with me, where it was like you were playing for extraordinary amounts of time without stopping because you enjoyed it so much. And I was going to ask you, like, how much you actually played to get to the skill level that you got to, because for me it was, I was playing 4 hours a night, and then after 6 months I was like better than most people I knew, because I did it every single day. I didn't like go out, I wasn't very sociable, I didn't watch a lot of TV. I literally just played guitar. I literally just put on headphones, like you said, put on a Blink-182 album from beginning to end, play it, and then pretend I was in the band, and then do the next album. And then when I discovered a new band, it was like, okay, cool, I'll buy that album and then just learn everything. And I never learned how to read music very well, like scores. For me, I got so good at learning by ear that I ended up, when I was teaching like songs that other kids wanted to learn how to play, I could listen to it and figure it all out on like most of the instruments and then say, this is what you need to play. But if you gave me a score and they said, can you teach us this? I would run away to the hills. That's not, I can't help you.
And
you need someone a lot more sophisticated.
But some of the best musicians and some of the most famous musicians can't read music, or can't communicate in that standard academic traditional way that some musicians do, and that's fine. And I don't think that talent or passion is always exclusively linked to being an academic theoretical musician. and that's fine. There are different pathways for everyone, and I was very much the same. I was very much a by ear kind of player, or I'd feel it, and then the theory kind of came into place later on. Honestly, it's a bit harder to do it that way, because you start to build your own picture and how you do things, and get a bit set in your ways, and then someone comes along and says, oh, there's already a concept for this.
True.
So it is a bit harder that way. So I would always say it's beneficial to learn the theory alongside it, because it gives you more kind of tools in the toolbox, but it's
definitely
not always that enjoyable for everyone. And I, for one, am someone who has struggled with theory, and it kind of dampens the fire a little bit for me when someone's like, oh, but what chord progression is that? And you're just like, oh, it just sounds good, let's just let it sound good. And I think that's where like the passion comes into it. I think when I was playing all those hours in the garage, I'd do exactly the same thing. I'd put a record on, I'd listen to it, and I was very lucky to have good oral skills that I could translate what I heard into, what must have been played. So much so that when I was 14, my dad took me down to sort of the local town and took me to a live music night. And it just so happened that one of the bands playing, their drummer hadn't turned up. And the other lads in the band were like, 10, 20 years older than me. And they were like, oh, we're not going to be able to play, our drummer's not turned up. And my dad, just being the biggest cheerleader, as most parents are, were like, oh, my daughter's a drummer, she'll play drums for you. And, as I'm sat there like wide-eyed thinking, oh my God, no, don't sign me up for this, petrified, having never played a gig before. So I kind of got thrown in at the deep end, found myself behind a drum kit playing a covers set of varied rock tracks from ZZ Top to everything through to like Nirvana, and playing a load of songs that I'd never even heard before. And I remember that gig really, really clearly. And the other two guys in the band were really great. They were really accommodating. They were just like, well, we just want to play. So yeah, if you want to play drums, brilliant. And they just dictated the songs to me. So they'd start playing. And I remember we did, we did a ZZ Top track. I can't remember which one it was now. And I'd never heard it. I hadn't even heard of ZZ Top. And they were like, right, it goes like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And they'd count me in and they'd say, right, just a 4/4. So doot, cat, doot, cat. And I'd play like the Duracell bunny until they told me to stop. And they'd turn around and be like, 1, 2, 3, stop. Whenever there was like a bar of silence. And then they'd be like, now just kick drum. And I played the whole gig like that. And I was on the edge of my seat, so petrified, amazing. But I managed to get through it. And everyone was loving it. And, I think they did such a good job at translating what they wanted. And I'd built up enough kind of oral skills to be like, oh, okay, I understand how that should sound. Now, yes, it might have been much easier if they'd have gone, here's the charts for all of the songs, and me to go, oh, great, because I can read music and I'll play those. But it wouldn't have been half as fun. It was so much fun that we were just doing this kind of like Tetris music game. And I'll always remember that. That was like one of my fondest memories. So I think it is really important to kind of build those skills as well.
You literally, the story you've just told is like the drummer's equivalent to the scene from Back to the Future with Marty McFly, where they don't have the guitarist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm imagining in my head right now. It's like, my daughter can play, and then you going on and just be like Johnny B. Gooding it out on like the drums.
That is exactly how it was.
That's so cool. That's like literally every musician's dream, by the way, is that exact
or nightmare. If you were there, you probably think, that was a nightmare.
Or nightmare.
But it is so important.
And you've gone on. Sorry,
I was just going to say it is so important because the one thing that I was through that whole gig was really fearful because I'd never really played before. I didn't know the songs. There were so many variables and things that could go wrong. But honestly, it taught me resilience. Whenever I kind of get a gig and I've got like a really short time to maybe learn the set, or I'm not confident in my skills, I think back to that and I'm like, do you know what? That the most things that could have gone wrong for that show could have, but I still had a brilliant time and it was really good fun and everyone loved it because it was real, it was passionate, we were just figuring our way through. and it was human at the end of the day, and that's what music's supposed to be about. Like if you take some of that natural ability and just joy out of it, it just becomes music by numbers. And yeah, anyone can do that, but like, where's the passion? Where's the unique element and the thing that really inspires people, makes them want to listen to it?
What would you have told, like, what advice would you give to that 14-year-old girl now that you're playing in front of literally thousands of people, and you're not relying on a drummer not turning up? you're in the band.
Oh, blimey, what advice? I think just, again, it's going to sound really cliche, but like, just believe in yourself. I think...
Yeah, 100%.
I think, you know, I wasn't brilliant back then. There were times I was just downright awful, but I should have just had confidence in myself anyway, because it wouldn't have changed the outcome. I was still going to apply myself. I was still going to try as hard as possible. But I just, you know, I put so much pressure on myself and had so much anxiety about being good, when I should have just focused on playing and having a good time, and just believed in myself, because I did really apply myself. I wanted to be good. I put the time in and the hours, and that comes through. Like, any time that I see a student or, you know, sort of a young protege coming through, it is so obvious to see the people that have put the hours in and the practice, and the people that haven't, and the ones that are just trying to wing it. You can smell that a mile off. And I'm not saying that either approach is right or wrong, but it's just about having fun. And so many of my students, unfortunately, suffer from performance anxiety, nerves on stage, and they all want this magical formula of, how do I stop that happening? How do I overcome it? Honestly, there is no magical formula. As anyone in the music industry, or anyone that plays music, or even public speaking or podcasts, would have learned, the only way that you overcome that is by doing it again, doing it better, doing it more, doing it over again, and learning from that. You know, the more you chip away at it, the more comfortable that becomes, the more problems you encounter and troubleshoot and overcome and come out alive. You're like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. I can do that again. And you just got to chip away at it and just be resilient and just enjoy it, because you just never know when it might be over. Like, you know, there was times in COVID where I was like, oh my God, am I ever going to play another gig again? Is that it? Was that my time? Right. And I was so grateful for the time I had, but I was so like, no, I'm not ready for this to be over. So yeah, just believe in yourself and have fun with it, you know, be passionate about it and just enjoy every second.
It's interesting we talk about stage fright, because I think that is it would be such a shame to see some really talented and skillful musicians and artists retract from wanting to share the music with a live audience because they're terrified of like being on stage. And I think you make a really good analogy between public speaking and performing live, because I think there's a lot of similarity there. Because you're very exposed. You got a spotlight, a literal spotlight on you, not a metaphorical one, a real spotlight on you. And I remember I've been on stages before where the spotlight is literally so bright that you can't see anything else. You can't actually see what's out there. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but like, man, that was actually a real learning curve for me, because I remember being like so sweaty and I couldn't see if the audience was having a good time. And I was like, this is like an issue that I have to work through. Like, I didn't think of, like, you know, when I was sitting at home, like writing down some lyrics, that this was going to be something I had to learn how to manage, was like the pure heat of the light and not being able to see out into the audience. Such a strange thing. But one thing I was going to mention to you was, so there's new technologies that are actually being created. Have you heard of Ensemble VR, for example?
No, I don't think I have.
Right, so there's like these technologies that essentially immerse performers in realistic concert environments.
Oh, great. Okay.
So that they can essentially experience that being in among a live audience where, you know, there's cheering and there's the thumping and there's like the general crowd like I was going to call it audio, but the sound of like the audience just like talking and things like
Yeah.
that, to try and simulate it. And actually they have this, I think it's at universities, at certain universities, they have this. And I was talking to someone recently who works at university that has it for their students, but they basically do this to help them get over that. And I think it's a really interesting space to watch, because I'm always a little bit kind of skeptical about stuff like that, because I'm like, it's not the real thing, and you would know that it's not the real thing, so how effective would it be? Right. But I think what you're saying is completely true in a lot of areas of life. It's like, if you want to be good at anything, just like keep doing it and keep failing and getting back up and then doing it better, like you said. And I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice that you give to any person who's like learning an instrument or trying to be successful in an industry, is like, don't go in like thinking you're gonna nail it 100% and you're gonna like start reaping all those rewards. There's gonna be so many ups and downs, and I remember stories you've shared with me where you've had some serious challenges. For example, like when you had your drums stolen out of the van, and someone stole your car as well. Did they steal your car?
The whole lot.
Tell the story, because this is like,
oh god, yeah. Anytime I think about this, I can feel the sweat rolling down my forehead again. Like, it was just horrible, and it is just the worst nightmare of any musician. It was when I lived in London, and the band that I was playing in, we were due to play a festival in Hamburg in Germany about 48 hours later, and we'd just done a show in London, and we'd finished quite late, and I think we were loading all of our equipment back into the house in London at about 1 a.m. I think it was like a weekday morning, maybe like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I'd had a brand new car. I'd only had it for about a week. My dad had sort of sorted the insurance temporarily and everything for me, and I had a drum kit that wasn't very old. The other person in the band had a brand new Fender amp, and we'd kind of put it all in my car, which was a Dacia Sandero at the time, aka the TARDIS, because you could just get so much equipment in that thing, and it was just like, it was just never ending. It was brilliant, really cost effective.
Musician recommended vehicle right there.
Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far, but yeah, and yeah, so we were outside of the house at like 1 a.m, loading the equipment back in, one by one. One of us would stay with the car, one of us would be inside. Anyway, somehow, I still, to this day, don't know how it happened. Between us loading the equipment in, I also had my rucksack, which had an iPad in it, which I used for the show to kind of fire the backing tracks. I had my passport in my bag. I had my spare set of car keys. Yeah, my purse, all my ID, credit cards, debit cards, everything. Like, basically my whole life was in that bag. And
Jesus.
Somehow, between us loading the equipment in, I noticed that my rucksack had gone, and I was like, well, I don't remember bringing it into the house, but I don't remember taking it out of the car. So where could it have gone? We literally stood outside of the house on the main road, parked on the main road. Where could it have gone between there and here? Anyway, we stopped loading in for a minute, and there was still a fair bit left in the car, amps, drum kit. And we went into the house, and we were like, let's just retrace our steps. Some of the stuff we brought in's in here. Let's just go through it. Anyway, we couldn't find it anywhere, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, my mind was boggled. I was like, how could we have lost it? And yeah, so I was like, the only thing I can think of is maybe one of us didn't notice that someone came past and picked it up out of the car or from the side of the car. So I'm trying to think back now. I think we decided to, that was it. Yeah. We decided to go back outside again and sort of have another look, only to then find that as we stepped out the door, the car had gone. And it was just like a comedy of errors, because as we were unloading the car, I remember seeing the lights on the car flash. And, you know, it's in like when you lock the car and it goes like, deep, deep, and the lights will flash. And I remember thinking, did I actually see that? Or like, is it because I'm tired and I've played a show? And then thinking, oh, you know, thinking nothing of it and just being like, whatever. Anyway, when we kind of thought it all through and thought it back, what must have happened is, as we were unloading, someone had swiped my bag with the spare set of car keys, my passport, all my cards, my iPad. I'd obviously gone to the end of the road and rifled through the bag to see what goodies were in there, and then gone, oh, there's a set of keys here. So they must have been able to see us. What was my tummy rumbling? Yeah, they must have been able to see us as we'd gone back into the house, and had then tried their luck, walked down the street and just kind of sort of used the keys just to see which car and just check. And then when we'd gone in the house, they must have come back for the car and then bolted off with that. So yeah, in the space of like half an hour, everything had gone. And I was just absolutely beside myself. Because we hadn't seen anyone, we were like, how has this even happened? What's going on? And, you know, it quickly became evident that everything had gone. So we called the police. They came out at about 3:00 in the morning. I'll be really honest, they were completely useless. They were like, usually in cases of car thefts, we won't recover the car, so don't expect to see it again. I was like, brilliant. I'm really glad that we pay taxes. Fantastic. Really like nonchalantly, just like, don't expect to see your car again. You've got insurance, haven't you? Yeah, that's what insurance is for. Like, great, thanks. So I was freaking out because I was like, oh my God, I've had the car for like a week. My dad's, you know, insured it for me and everything. My dad's gonna kill me. And we've lost all of our stuff. And we're supposed to be in Germany playing one of the biggest festivals that we have had the opportunity to do. And I've got no passport. So, it was just a complete nightmare. Anyway, I did what every 24, I can't remember how old I was, 24-year-old adult would do. And I called my dad and I was like, Dad, help me, fix the problem, please. Bless him. And he was up in Telford at the time, like, you know, 2.5 hours away. And he was like, look, get a couple of hours sleep. It's 3 a.m. You've played a show. You've had a big shock. Try and get some sleep. Call me in the morning. We'll figure this out. Anyway, I woke up at like 7 a.m. to knock on the door, and my dad had just driven down and was like, right, I'm here. Let's sort this out. Absolute legend. And and I was like, what am I going to do? We've got this show. I've got no passport. I can't get to Germany. I don't even know if I've got time to get an emergency passport. Even if I have time to get an emergency passport, I've got no ID. I've got no money on me. Like, everything was in that bag. And the other girl in the band was like, well, what do we do? Because her flight was actually a bit earlier than mine. She was like, do I still go and get my flight, or do we cancel the show, or do I go anyway and hope that you can follow me out there? I was just like, look, go out there. Worst comes to worst, if I can't get out there, just go and represent us and at least go and network and tell everyone what's happened so they know that we haven't just pulled out. That's what she did. So she kind of went off ahead, got to Germany, and then it was like countdown for me. It was like against the clock. Can I get a passport? Can I, figure all this out? Anyway, long story short, I did manage to get an emergency passport out of complete potluck and flew to Germany. I didn't even have a pair of drumsticks on me because everything was in the car. And I remember getting to the festival and being like, furnish me. Someone get me drumsticks. Someone get me some makeup because I look like I've been dug up. And honestly, and everyone rallied round and it was so lovely. And it really just proved what a community the music industry is. And we managed to play the show and it was brilliant. And it was even better because we were like, you know what? To the scumbags who stole all of our stuff, screw you. We're still here. We're having a good time. And despite everything, we've managed to carry on. So let that be a lesson to you, whoever you are that nicked that car. I hope that Dacia was worth it.
Whatever happened to the Dacia?
I know, utter madness.
Oh my God. What? That's such an amazing story, like comeback story right there, because it's like you literally had everything taken from you. For like, if I lose just my car keys or I lose like my debit card, I'm freaking out. So like the fact that you literally lost your car, your instrument, your passport when you needed to get into another country, and your purse, everything, your iPad. Oh my God, Jesus, that's the way that you ended up in that situation, and the outcome is like Hollywood quality stuff. I think that's amazing.
To sell that story to the newspapers one day.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I think like that's just demonstrates how it can really be risky in the music industry. That it can, like, you can have your ups and your downs, but it's also like an incredible place to be, because when, like you said, when you're around those people like helping you and wanting to put on a good show, and then the impact it would have had on the audience, and then you seeing that made it all worth it in the end. And like where you've got to now, it's incredible, because I mean we're talking this was years ago now, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, this was a good sort of probably 5-6 years ago now.
Yeah, so I guess I have one last question for you. What does it feel like when you're playing in front of audiences like that, and they're cheering for like the work that you're doing, the performance you're giving? Because I can't imagine anything to compare that to. It must be amazing.
Yeah, it is. I think it's complete euphoria, really. There's a mixture of things that go on for me. Again, I can only kind of speak for myself of what happens in that scenario, but there's a real mixture of things, because even now, after all this time, I still get nervous. I still sometimes get a bit of stage fright, depending on the show or the capacity, or how much is kind of riding on it. I still do get those nerves, and honestly I think now it's a good amount, because it just shows me that I care, and it helps push me to be better and put on a better show. So I try and kind of flip that and use it as like motivation. But there's been so many times that I've really tried to be present in the moment and kind of look out and think, like, soak this up, because this is really special. Not everyone gets to do this. You are so privileged to be in this position. And it could all end tomorrow. And I really try and be present in the moment and think, if this is my last gig, really take it all in and think about the journey here. Think about the fact that these people have not only made time in their lives to come and see you, but spent their money to buy a ticket. They're singing words back to you, that you've written, or it's sort of air drumming along to parts that you've written. And yeah, there's nothing like it. It's just the most wonderful connection, because you do feel like you are in the crowd and like they're on stage with you. You kind of feel like the whole thing becomes one. And it's brilliant, because there's been so many times I've been stood there thinking, this is crazy. I get paid to do this. Like, I get paid to do this. And it's the most fun.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just feel super lucky. And you come off stage just being like buzzing, yeah, let's do this again. And even if you've been on tour for like 5 weeks and it's the last show and you're knackered and you haven't slept properly and you're a bit dishevelled and you've had the flu, you've lost your voice a bit and some of your hair's falling out, by the end of it, you do that last show and you're just like, oh my God, let's keep going for another 5 weeks, because the euphoria and just the organic joy that you feel is just like nothing else. So yeah, it is amazing. I recommend it to everyone. Just, even if you're not a musician, just run on stage at some point and just take it in. Don't do that. I'm not condoning that.
You're not condoning stage rushes at all. Yeah, I mean, you're making me think about brushing the dust off of my own guitar when you talk about that. It's
great, isn't
really
it?
Cool.
Like, it just kind of translates and just passes from person to person.
It does. Collette, it's been absolutely amazing having you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story and giving us some advice on what it takes to be a musician in the industry.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.